The compound sat in darkness 3 kilometers outside Al-Hasaka, a collection of mud brick buildings that had seen too many wars and sheltered too many secrets. Inside, 8 Delta Force operators moved through rooms still warm with the body heat of men who had fled minutes earlier, searching for the high-value target who possessed intelligence that could save hundreds of American lives. Outside, on a ridge 1,400 meters to the northwest, Alexandra Brennan lay prone behind a rifle that cost more than most people's cars. She was 29 years old, weighed 118 pounds, and at that moment was the most dangerous person in a 5-mile radius. The wind cut across the Syrian desert at 18 miles per hour, carrying sand that stung exposed skin, and the smell of diesel fuel from generators running in the valley below. Through her scope, Alex watched the compound's rooftop, where an enemy sniper had taken position, his rifle tracking the same doorways her teammates would soon exit through. Her radio crackled. "Overwatch, this is Alpha 1. We have the package. Exfil in 90 seconds. The enemy sniper shifted, settling into a firing position aimed at the compound's main entrance. Alex's breathing slowed automatically, her heart rate dropping from 60 beats per minute to 42. She had made shots like this before, in conditions worse than this, in places that would never appear on any map. But this one mattered more than most. The target intelligence concerned coordinated attacks on 3 U.S. embassies. 400 American lives hung in the balance, along with the 8 operators currently making their way through the compound, and the 4 Army Rangers providing perimeter security. One of those Rangers was a 29-year-old staff sergeant named Caleb Thorne. Overwatch, Alpha 1. Enemy sniper on target building rooftop. Can you engage? Alex's fingers made microscopic adjustments to her scope's windage and elevation knobs. The math happened in the back of her mind, automatic as breathing. Distance, 1,427 meters. Wind, 18 miles per hour, quartering from right to left. Temperature, 41 degrees Fahrenheit. Barometric pressure, standard. Target, moving slowly, predictable pattern, unaware he was being hunted. Alpha 1, Overwatch, I can make it. A pause. The team leader knew her well enough to hear what she wasn't saying. Making the shot wasn't the question. Making it in time was. Take it when ready, Overwatch. Clock is running. Alex's world narrowed to the space between her position and the enemy sniper. She watched him through the scope, learning his rhythm. 2 seconds, scanning left. 3 seconds, scanning right. 1 second, checking his 6. Repeat. He was good, trained, disciplined, but he didn't know she existed. The wind shifted slightly, dropping to 16 miles per hour. Alex's body registered the change before her conscious mind did. Her finger moved to the trigger, taking up the slack with the same pressure she might use to wake a sleeping child. The enemy sniper paused his scan, settling his rifle toward the compound entrance. Alex exhaled half a breath and pressed the trigger. The rifle's recoil was familiar as a handshake from an old friend. The suppressor reduced the sound to a sharp crack that the wind carried away across empty desert. Through her scope, Alex watched the round's flight, though at this distance and in darkness, it was more feeling than seeing. 3.2 seconds of flight time. 3.2 seconds of faith that her calculations were correct, that the wind wouldn't shift, that the target wouldn't move. The enemy sniper's head snapped back. He collapsed behind the low wall of the rooftop, his weapon clattering on concrete Alex couldn't see, but could imagine. Threat neutralized, she said into her radio, her voice steady. You're clear to exfil. Copy, Overwatch. Good shooting. We're moving. Through her scope, Alex watched 8 shadows emerge from the compound, moving fast and low toward the extraction point. Behind them, 4 Rangers provided covering fire that wouldn't be needed. The package moved in the center of the formation, a middle-aged man in civilian clothes who had no idea how many people would live because of what he knew. The helicopters came in low and fast, Black Hawks cutting through the night with rotor wash that kicked up sand in clouds that obscured everything. The operators loaded quickly, professionally, and were airborne again in 47 seconds. Alex remained in position for another 20 minutes, watching the compound for follow-up threats that never materialized. Only when she received the code word confirming the helicopters were clear of Syrian airspace did she break down her rifle, secure her position, and begin the long walk to her own extraction point. She thought about the enemy's sniper as she walked. He had been good, disciplined, professional. He had died not knowing she existed, which was how it was supposed to be. Ghosts didn't leave witnesses. Ghosts didn't exist at all. The helicopter that picked her up was different from the Blackhawks that had extracted the main team. Smaller, quieter, painted in colors that didn't exist in any military handbook. The crew wore no insignia, and the pilot didn't speak except to confirm she was secured before lifting off. Alex leaned her head back against the bulkhead and closed her eyes, feeling the vibration of the rotors through her body. Somewhere ahead in the darkness, 8 Delta operators and 4 Rangers were heading home with intelligence that would save hundreds of lives. They would receive medals, commendations, recognition for a job well done. Alex would receive a debriefing, a file notation that no one would ever read, and orders for the next mission that didn't officially exist. She was fine with that. The work was what mattered, not the recognition. At least, that's what she told herself. The screen went dark. White text appeared. 4 years later. The sun was just beginning to burn through the morning fog when Alexandra Brennan pulled her 15-year-old Honda Civic into the parking lot of the Coronado Naval Base firing range. It was 6:15 in the morning on a Tuesday in June 2023, which meant she would have at least 30 minutes before the first SEAL training blocks arrived. She preferred it that way. Fewer questions, fewer eyes, fewer people noticing that the small woman in the faded Marine's hoodie and jeans shot with a precision that didn't match her civilian appearance. Alex had been coming to this range 3 times a week for the past 3 months. She had proper authorization through the public access program. All her paperwork was in order, and she followed every safety protocol with a discipline that made the range officers nod in approval on the rare occasions they bothered to check her credentials. What the range officers didn't know, what nobody at Coronado knew, was that the woman at Lane 7 had once been considered one of the most lethal precision shooters in the United States military, that she had operated in places that didn't exist, completed missions that would never be acknowledged, and learned skills from a program so classified that even the people who ran it weren't entirely sure who else had clearance to know it existed. Over 4 years ago, that program had been shut down. The political landscape had shifted, budgets had been reallocated, and someone high up in the Department of Defense had decided that the risk of female operators in Tier 1 special operations was no longer worth the potential reward. Alex and the other women in the program had been given new identities, non-disclosure agreements that would follow them to their graves, and polite suggestions to disappear into civilian life and never speak of what they'd done. Most of them had complied. A few had struggled. 2 had taken their own lives within the first year, unable to reconcile the warriors they'd been with the invisible civilians they'd been told to become. Alex had survived by finding this range, this small slice of the life she'd lost, where she could hold a rifle and remember who she'd been before the bureaucrats decided she shouldn't exist. She checked in at the range office, nodding to the young petty officer behind the desk who barely glanced at her ID before waving her through. By the time she reached Lane 7, the sun had climbed higher, burning away the last of the fog and revealing the target arrays stretching out to 1,000 meters. Her rifle case was unremarkable from the outside, a standard hard-shell container that could have held any number of sporting rifles. Inside, wrapped in custom foam cutouts, was a Macmillan TAC-50 chambered in .50 BMG with a Schmidt and Bender scope that cost more than the rifle itself. The weapon represented 3 years of savings from her cover job as a freelance photographer, every paycheck carefully diverted toward the one thing that still connected her to the person she used to be. The rifle had been built to her exact specifications by a gunsmith who didn't ask questions when she'd provided measurements and requirements that suggested professional military training. Alex assembled the rifle with movements so economical they barely registered as motion. Stock attached, scope mounted, magazine loaded with hand-selected ammunition she'd purchased from a supplier who catered to competitive long-range shooters and didn't question why a small woman needed match-grade 50 BMG rounds. The first target sat at 400 meters, a distance most recreational shooters never attempted. Alex settled into position, feeling her body fall into the familiar geometry of precision shooting. Her breathing slowed, her heart rate dropped. The world narrowed to the space between her position and the target. She fired. The round punched through the 10 ring with surgical precision. Behind her, though she didn't turn to look, a young Marine corporal had stopped mid-step on his way to his own lane. His eyes tracked from the target monitor to the small woman in the faded hoodie, then back to the monitor. He said nothing, but his trajectory changed. Instead of continuing to lane 12, he drifted closer to lane 7, drawn by something he couldn't quite name. Alex fired again. Another 10 ring. She adjusted her scope fractionally and moved to the 600-meter target. The round flew true, impacting exactly where she'd aimed. She had learned long ago that acknowledgement invited conversation, and conversation invited questions she couldn't answer. So she simply reached for another magazine, her hands moving with the unconscious grace of someone who had performed this action 10,000 times in circumstances far more dire than a sunny California morning. For 3 hours, Alex shot. She moved through distances and conditions systematically, building a rhythm that was part meditation and part muscle memory maintenance. 400 meters, 600 meters, 800 meters, each grouping tight enough to cover with a playing card. The range had filled around her as morning training blocks arrived. SEALs in various stages of their qualification cycles, some shooting pistols at close range, others working through rifle drills. None of them approached her. None of them spoke to her, but she felt their attention like heat on her skin. They had noticed. Of course they had noticed. You didn't spend years training the world's most elite warriors without developing an eye for genuine capability. The woman at lane 7 had been shooting for 3 hours without missing, at distances most of them struggled with a calmness that suggested this was easy for her. But none of them said anything. Military culture had its own codes, and one of them was that you didn't interrupt someone who was clearly in the zone, clearly working through something, clearly using the range for purposes that went beyond simple practice. Alex was loading her final magazine of the morning when she heard the voice behind her. "Excuse me, ma'am." She looked up to find a young Marine corporal standing a respectful distance away, his rifle hanging across his chest at a slightly awkward angle that marked him as someone still getting used to carrying a weapon as an extension of himself. He couldn't have been more than 22, all squared shoulders and fresh motivation, and the kind of earnest expression that made Alex's chest tighten with memories of other young warriors she'd trained. "Yes," Alex said, keeping her voice neutral. "I don't mean to bother you, ma'am, but..." He gestured to his rifle with visible frustration. "My rifle's been pulling left all morning. The armorer checked it twice, said it's fine, but I know what I'm seeing. My qualification is in 2 days, and I can't figure out what I'm doing wrong." Alex studied him for a moment. She saw the slight tension in his left shoulder, the way his grip strangled the weapon just a fraction too tight. She saw 100 other young warriors just like him from another life, another version of herself who had been allowed to help. The smart play was to deflect, to offer sympathy but no solutions, to maintain the low profile she'd worked so hard to establish. But looking at this kid's face, seeing the genuine distress of a young warrior who knew he was failing and didn't understand why, Alex felt the old instinct rise in her chest, the desire to teach, to share what she knew with someone hungry to learn. "May I?" she asked, gesturing to his rifle. The Marine's eyebrows climbed toward his cover. He hesitated for a fraction of a second, clearly trying to reconcile the small woman in civilian clothes with someone who might actually be able to help. Then he handed over his rifle. Alex accepted the weapon, immediately feeling the imbalance he'd created with his grip. Her hands made millimeter adjustments, showing him without words where the tension needed to release. "You're fighting the rifle," she said softly, settling the weapon against her shoulder with the unconscious ease of someone who'd done this 10,000 times. "It wants to settle here." She shifted the stock slightly. "You're forcing it here. Let it rest where it wants to rest." She handed the rifle back to him, her movements careful and deliberate. "Try it." The Marine took his weapon back like it was made of something precious. He moved to his lane, adjusted his stance the way she'd shown him, and sent a round downrange. The shot hit dead center. "Holy hell," the Marine breathed, turning back to Alex with something like reverence in his eyes. "Ma'am, how did you see that? I've had 3 different instructors try to fix my pull, and you just looked at me for like 10 seconds and knew exactly what it was." Alex felt the old satisfaction mixing with the familiar loss. There had been a time when teaching young warriors was her purpose, when she had been trusted with the most dangerous students America could produce, when her knowledge had been valued, sought after, considered an essential part of preparing operators for missions where failure meant death. Now she hid in plain sight, helping when she could, vanishing before anyone looked too closely. "Spent some time around rifles," she said with a small smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Good luck on your qualification." The Marine looked like he wanted to ask more, but something in Alex's posture had shifted, a door quietly closing. He nodded, his gratitude obvious even in his retreat. "Thank you, ma'am. Seriously." Alex watched him return to his lane, already shooting better, his confidence rebuilt by a 60-second intervention. She felt the familiar ache of satisfaction mixed with loss. There had been a time when this was everything, when teaching young warriors to survive was her purpose, her identity, her reason for existing. Now it was stolen moments and careful deflections, and the constant awareness that one wrong word could bring scrutiny she couldn't afford. She turned back to her own lane, reaching for her rifle. The familiar weight settled into her hands like coming home to a place that no longer existed. Alex was lining up her next shot when she felt the shift in atmosphere behind her. The conversation among the SEALs at the far end of the range had stopped. She didn't need to turn around to know they were watching. The young Marine's reaction had been too visible, his gratitude too obvious. In a community of warriors who prided themselves on expertise, someone casually fixing what 3 instructors couldn't would draw attention like blood in water. She forced herself to remain calm, to not alter her routine. Changing behavior now would only confirm whatever suspicions were forming. So she simply continued her pattern. Load, breathe, aim, fire. Each shot a perfect echo of the last. Each impact exactly where she intended. At the far end of the range, Chief Warrant Officer Garrett Thorne lowered his binoculars and turned to Senior Chief Marcus Landry. "You seeing what I'm seeing?" Garrett asked, his voice carrying the gravelly tone of a man who'd spent 34 years in the SEALs and thought he'd seen everything. Landry nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving the woman at Lane 7. "That's not recreational shooting." "No," Garrett agreed. "That's something else entirely." He studied the woman with the intensity he usually reserved for threat assessment. Small frame, maybe 5'4", civilian clothes that hung loose enough to hide her build. Faded Marine's hoodie, but something about the way she wore it suggested it was camouflage rather than service. Nothing about her screamed operator, but nothing about her screamed civilian either. She existed in some undefined space between, and that bothered Garrett more than he wanted to admit. "Who brings a custom Macmillan TAC-50 to a Navy range for fun?" Landry muttered. Garrett's jaw tightened. He was 62 years old, had served through the Cold War, the Gulf War, and 3 deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan. He had earned his Trident in 1982 when SEAL training was even more brutal than it was now. He had buried teammates, trained hundreds of young operators, and accumulated enough experience to recognize genuine capability when he saw it. The woman at Lane 7 had genuine capability, world-class capability. The kind of capability that didn't come from hobby shooting or competitive sports. The kind of capability that came from professional military training at the highest levels. And she was using it on his range, without explanation, without background, without any indication of who she really was or why she was really here. "I'm going to talk to her," Garrett said, already moving. Landry didn't try to stop him. They'd been swim buddies for 20 years. He knew that tone in Garrett's voice, knew that when Garrett Thorne decided something needed to be addressed, it was going to be addressed whether you liked it or not. Garrett walked toward Lane 7 with the measured stride of someone who'd spent decades earning authority and wasn't shy about using it. SEALs didn't tolerate pretenders, and they especially didn't tolerate civilians treating their range like a public shooting gallery. If this woman wanted to play operator, she was about to learn what actual operators thought of the performance. Alex sensed him before she heard him. The quality of attention had changed from passive observation to active approach. She kept her eyes on her target, refusing to acknowledge the shift, but her heart rate climbed despite her training. This was the moment she'd been trying to avoid for 3 months since she'd started coming to Coronado. The footsteps stopped 2 meters behind her, close enough to assert authority, far enough to maintain tactical courtesy. Whoever this was knew how to approach someone holding a weapon. Alex fired her last round, the shot as perfect as all the others, then carefully cleared her rifle and set it down. Only then did she turn around. The man standing behind her wore desert camouflage utilities and an expression that could have been carved from granite. His arms were crossed over a chest that spoke of thousands of hours in the weight room and decades of physical conditioning. Silver hair, weathered face, eyes that had seen too much and forgotten nothing. The insignia on his collar identified him as a chief warrant officer. The trident above his left pocket said SEAL. The look in his eyes said he'd been doing this a long time and wasn't impressed easily. "Can I help you, Chief?" Alex said, keeping her voice level. "Chief Warrant Officer Garrett Thorne," he said, not offering his hand. "I'm the senior range instructor here. You've been shooting on this facility for what, 3 months now?" "About that," Alex confirmed. "I have valid access authorization through the public access program. Everything's properly registered." Garrett's eyes narrowed slightly. "I'm not questioning your paperwork, ma'am. I'm questioning your skill level. That was some impressive shooting just now." "Thank you," Alex said, recognizing the statement for what it was. Not a compliment, a challenge. "Where did you train?" Garrett asked. The question was simple, but the weight behind it suggested he already knew she wouldn't answer honestly. Alex had prepared for this question, had rehearsed her answer until it sounded natural, unrehearsed, believable. "Grew up around firearms," she said. "Had some good instruction over the years. I enjoy the challenge of long-range work." Garrett's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, maybe, or calculation. "Good instruction," he repeated, making the words sound insufficient. "Ma'am, I've been doing this for 34 years. I know what good instruction looks like. What you just demonstrated isn't good instruction. That's elite-level capability." "I appreciate the compliment, Chief, but I think you might be overstating things. I just practice a lot." Garrett opened his mouth to respond when a sound cut through the air that made Alex's entire body lock up. The rhythmic thump of helicopter rotors approaching from the north. Blackhawks, her mind registered automatically. 2 of them, flying in formation. The world tilted sideways for half a second. Suddenly, Alex wasn't standing on a sunny California range, but crouched in darkness, the same helicopter sound overhead, the smell of cordite and blood thick in her throat. Her hands wanted to shake. She forced them still through sheer willpower, but not before Garrett's eyes tracked to the movement. "You good, ma'am?" he asked, and something in his voice had shifted. The aggressive interrogation had been replaced by something that sounded almost like concern. "Fine," Alex managed, hating how tight her voice sounded. "Just not a fan of helicopters." The Blackhawks passed overhead, their sound fading toward the Pacific. Alex's breathing slowly returned to normal, but she knew the damage was done. Garrett had seen the reaction, had cataloged it with the same attention to detail he probably used on combat patrols. "Interesting," Garrett said quietly. "Most civilians I know don't have trauma responses to standard helicopter traffic." Alex met his eyes directly. "I didn't say I was traumatized, Chief. I said I'm not a fan. There's a difference." "Is there?" Garrett asked. "Because from where I'm standing, you just had a physiological stress response that looked an awful lot like what I see in guys coming back from deployment." The conversation had gone somewhere Alex couldn't afford to let it go. She turned back to her rifle, beginning the process of breaking it down for cleaning. "I think we're done here, Chief. I appreciate your concern, but I'm fine. Just here to shoot, same as everyone else." Garrett didn't move. "You know what I think, ma'am? I think you're not just here to shoot. I think you have a background you're not talking about. And I think whatever that background is, it doesn't belong on a SEAL training facility range without proper disclosure." Alex's hands paused fractionally in their work. When she looked up at Garrett, her expression had gone completely neutral, the kind of neutral that was itself a tell for anyone trained to read people. "Chief Thorne, I've been nothing but respectful of this facility and its rules. I have proper authorization to be here. If you have a problem with that authorization, you're welcome to take it up with the public access coordinator. But unless you have an actual regulation I'm violating, I'd appreciate being allowed to finish my range time in peace." For a long moment, Garrett stared at her, clearly weighing his options. Finally, he nodded slowly. "Fair enough, ma'am. But let me be clear. This range is where we train the most elite warriors in the United States military. We don't take kindly to people playing dress-up and pretending to be something they're not. If you're just here for the Instagram photos and the thrill of shooting where SEALs shoot, maybe find another facility." Alex felt anger spike hot in her chest, but she kept it off her face. "I'm not here for photos, Chief. I'm here because this is a well-maintained range with excellent safety protocols and reasonable access fees. Same reason anyone else would be here." "Right," Garrett said, not sounding convinced at all. "Well, enjoy your shooting, ma'am. I'm sure we'll be seeing more of each other." He walked away, his posture radiating skepticism and territorial authority. Alex watched him go, then returned to her rifle maintenance with hands that wanted to shake, but didn't. She had been careful. She had been so careful, but apparently not careful enough. Across the range, Senior Chief Landry rejoined Garrett. "Well?" Landry asked. Garrett shook his head. "Something's not right about her. The shooting's too good. The rifle's too expensive. And she just about came apart when those helos flew over." "PTSD?" Landry suggested. "That's what I thought," Garrett agreed. "But civilians don't usually develop helicopter-specific combat trauma. That's a very particular kind of stress response." "So what are you thinking?" "I'm thinking," Garrett said slowly, "that maybe our mysterious civilian has some military background she's not advertising. Maybe contract work overseas, maybe something else. But nobody shoots like that without serious professional training." "You want me to run her name?" Garrett considered it, then shook his head. "Not yet. Let me watch her a bit more first. If she's retired military or former contract, she has every right to be here. But if she's lying about her background, trying to get close to SEAL operations for some reason, that's a different problem entirely." They both looked back at Lane 7, where Alex had finished cleaning her rifle and was packing it into its case with the same precise movements she used for everything else. She never looked in their direction, but somehow both men had the distinct impression she knew exactly where they were and what they were discussing. "That woman has situational awareness like I've never seen in a civilian," Landry muttered. "Yeah," Garrett agreed. watching as Alex shouldered her rifle case and headed for the parking lot. That's because I don't think she is one. Alex drove back to her small apartment in National City with her hands tight on the steering wheel and her mind already running through contingency plans. Maybe it was time to move on. San Diego had been comfortable, but comfort was a luxury she couldn't really afford. She could be in Arizona by tomorrow, Oregon by the weekend. Start over somewhere new, somewhere without curious seals asking questions she could never answer. But even as she thought it, she knew she wouldn't run. Not this time. She was tired of running. Her phone buzzed as she pulled into her parking spot. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her thumb the accept button. Alexandra Brennan, she said. The voice on the other end was professional, measured, and immediately identifiable as military. Miss Brennan, this is Commander Nathaniel Cross, SEAL Team 7. I was hoping you might have some time to talk this afternoon. Alex's pulse quickened. Commander, Garrett had escalated quickly. About what, sir? About your rather impressive performance at the range this morning. Word travels fast in the teams, Miss Brennan, especially when a civilian outperforms standards that, frankly, should not be possible. With respect, Commander, I don't think I did anything wrong. I have proper authorization to use the facility, and I followed all range safety protocols. You misunderstand, Miss Brennan, Commander Cross said, and there was something in his voice that made Alex pause. You're not in trouble. I'm just curious. And when I get curious, I tend to make phone calls. He paused, and Alex heard the sound of papers shuffling. I made several this morning, to some contacts of mine at SOCOM, at JSOC, even reached out to a friend who works adjacent to certain units that technically don't exist. Alex's blood went cold. Combat Applications Group, Delta Force, the unit that technically didn't exist and that she had technically never been part of. I'm not sure what you're implying, Commander, Alex said carefully. I'm not implying anything, Miss Brennan. I'm stating facts. The fact is that I've been in special operations for 23 years, and I've never seen shooting like what you demonstrated today. The other fact is that when I started asking very quiet questions through very discreet channels about female operators with your particular skill set, I got some very interesting non-answers. Alex said nothing. There was nothing to say that wouldn't make things worse. The kind of non-answers, Commander Cross continued, that tell me I'm asking about something classified above my pay grade. The kind of non-answers that come with polite suggestions to stop asking questions. What do you want, Commander? Alex asked quietly. I want to understand who's shooting on my facility, Cross said. Not because I want to expose you or cause you problems, but because I need to know. If you were one of ours, if you served in the shadows doing the things most people will never know about, then you deserve respect, not harassment. But I need to know the truth. Alex closed her eyes, leaning her head back against the car's headrest. She had kept this secret for 3 years, had built a new life on the foundation of anonymity and denial. But Commander Cross was right. The non-answers he had received were as good as confirmation. Someone at JSOC had recognized her name, had seen the flags in her file, and had quietly shut down his inquiry, which meant they knew exactly who she was and what she had done. I can't tell you what you want to know, Alex said finally. I legally can't tell you, but I will say this. I'm not a threat to anyone at Coronado. I'm just someone trying to live a quiet life after doing a job that doesn't officially exist. That's good enough for me, Cross said, and there was something like respect in his voice now. I'll make sure Chief Thorne backs off. He's a good SEAL, but he can be territorial. He doesn't need to know your background to leave you in peace. Thank you, sir, Alex said, surprised by the relief flooding through her. Miss Brennan, one more thing, Cross said. If you ever want to talk, operator to operator, my door is open. I imagine it gets lonely carrying those memories alone. The unexpected kindness hit Alex harder than any interrogation could have. Her throat tightened. I appreciate that, Commander. She ended the call and sat in her car for a long moment, processing what had just happened. Commander Cross had figured it out, or at least figured out enough, and instead of pushing for answers he knew she couldn't give, he had offered solidarity, understanding, recognition that she was one of them, even if the official record would never reflect it. Alex looked at her phone, at the list of contacts that was shorter than it should be for someone her age. 3 years of isolation, 3 years of being no one, having been someone who mattered. Maybe Commander Cross was right. Maybe it was lonely. But lonely was safe. Lonely was controllable. Lonely meant no one asked questions about the scars she carried, both the ones visible on her body and the ones hidden deeper. Alex climbed out of her car and headed into her apartment, the rifle case heavy on her shoulder. Tomorrow she would return to the range, same as always. She would shoot at Lane 7, same as always. And she would continue being Alexandra Brennan, freelance photographer and civilian shooter, same as always. Even if a small part of her wondered what it might be like to stop hiding, to step into the light and claim the expertise she'd earned through blood and sacrifice. But that was a dangerous thought. The kind of thought that led to exposure, investigation, and the end of the fragile peace she'd built. So Alex pushed it away, locked her rifle in its case, and tried not to think about the fact that Commander Cross had offered her something she'd been missing for 3 years. Recognition, respect, the acknowledgement that what she'd done mattered, even if no one could ever know about it. It was more than she'd had yesterday, and for now, that would have to be enough. 4 days passed before Alex returned to Coronado. 4 days of weighing options, considering alternatives, reminding herself that the smart operator never revealed more capability than absolutely necessary. 4 days of remembering Commander Cross's words about not being alone. On the 5th day, she drove back to the range. She arrived early, before the morning training blocks, when the fog still hung thick over the base and turned the world soft and gray. The parking lot was nearly empty, just a few staff vehicles and the familiar sight of her aging Honda among the newer trucks and SUVs that Seals favored. Alex had just finished setting up at Lane 7 when she heard voices approaching. Multiple voices. Her stomach sank even before she turned around. Chief Warrant Officer Garrett Thorne stood at the entrance to the covered firing line, flanked by 8 other SEALs in various stages of their morning workout gear. All of them were watching her with expressions that ranged from curiosity to barely concealed amusement. This wasn't a coincidence. This was orchestrated. "Morning, ma'am," Garrett called out, his voice carrying the false friendliness of someone about to make a point. "Glad to see you back. The guys and I were talking about you." Alex straightened from her rifle case, keeping her face neutral. "Is that right?" "Oh yeah," Garrett continued, walking closer. The other SEALs followed, forming a loose semicircle that wasn't quite threatening, but definitely intentional. "See, I was telling them about the shooting I saw you do last week. Really impressive stuff. World-class even." Alex waited, knowing whatever came next was designed to put her on the defensive. "And you know what they said?" Garrett spread his hands in a gesture of false bewilderment. "They said I must be exaggerating, because nobody shoots that well without serious professional training. And you told me yourself you're just a hobbyist who practices a lot." One of the SEALs behind him, a muscular lieutenant with a cocky grin, chimed in. "The chief here has been known to oversell things. Remember that bar in Dubai? Said it had the best kebabs in the Middle East. Gave me food poisoning for 3 days." The other operators laughed, but their eyes never left Alex. This was theater, and she was the unwilling star. "So here's what I was thinking," Garrett said, his tone shifting to something harder. "How about a friendly demonstration? You show the guys what you can do, prove I wasn't exaggerating, and we can all go about our morning. Sound fair?" Alex felt the trap closing around her. If she refused, she looked like a fraud, confirming Garrett's suspicion that she'd been overstating her abilities. If she accepted and performed poorly, same result. But if she accepted and shot the way she actually could, She would only deepen the mystery around her background, invite more questions she couldn't answer. The smart play was to refuse, pack up her gear, leave with dignity, find another range somewhere else in San Diego County, cut her losses and disappear again. But as she looked at Garrett's smug expression, at the way he'd brought an audience specifically to humiliate her, something hard and stubborn rose in her chest. She had spent 3 years hiding, 3 years diminishing herself, pretending to be less than she was, swallowing the knowledge that she had served her country in ways these men would never know. 3 years of being dismissed, underestimated, treated like her expertise was something to be ashamed of rather than honored. And she was tired, bone tired of pretending that the skills she'd earned through blood and sacrifice didn't matter. "What did you have in mind?" Alex asked quietly. Garrett's smile widened. "Nothing crazy. Standard SEAL sniper qualification course. 600 meters, 10 rounds, time limit of 2 minutes. You game?" Alex did a quick calculation. Standard SEAL qualification required hitting a man-sized target at 600 meters with at least 7 of 10 rounds. For qualified SEAL snipers, it was challenging but achievable. For a supposed civilian hobbyist, it should be nearly impossible. Garrett was betting she would fail, publicly and definitively. "What happens if I pass?" Alex asked. Garrett laughed, a sound without humor. "If you pass, I'll personally apologize for doubting you and never question your presence on this range again." He paused, his expression hardening. "But when you fail, you agree to stop coming here. Find a different facility for your hobby shooting." Alex should have walked away. Every instinct trained into her over a decade of classified operations screamed that this was bad tactics, that exposing her capabilities served no strategic purpose. But another part of her, the part that had been forced to disappear, that had been erased from official records and denied recognition for her service, wanted desperately to be seen, to prove just once that she was everything they tried to erase. "Deal," Alex said. The SEALs stirred with interest. Apparently, they'd expected her to back down. Garrett's expression flickered with something that might have been surprise before settling back into confidence. "Lane 12, he said. "Standard SEAL target configuration. Landry, get the timer ready." Alex picked up her rifle and walked to lane 12, aware of 9 sets of eyes tracking her every movement. The fog was starting to burn off, revealing the target array downrange. At 600 meters, the silhouette targets looked impossibly small, barely visible in the morning light. She settled into position, feeling her body shift into the familiar geometry of precision shooting. Her breathing slowed automatically. Her heart rate dropped. The world narrowed to the space between her position and the target, everything else fading into irrelevance. This was the state she had lived in for years, the place where she was most herself, most alive. It felt like coming home after a long exile. 2 minutes on my mark," Senior Chief Landry called out, his hand on a stopwatch. 3, 2, 1, mark! Alex's first shot broke before the word mark had fully left his mouth. The target monitor showed an immediate center mass hit. She cycled the bolt, acquired the target again, and fired. Another hit. The rhythm took over, her body moving through the sequence with the automaticity of perfect training. Load, breathe, fire. The rifle became an extension of her body. The target became the only thing that existed. The watching SEALs, Garrett's challenge, the consequences of what she was doing, all of it disappeared into the narrow focus of this moment. 10 rounds in 47 seconds, 10 center mass hits. Alex engaged the safety, cleared her weapon, and stood up. Only then did she turn to face the SEALs. The silence behind her was profound. Garrett stared at the target monitor like it had personally offended him. His jaw worked soundlessly for a moment before he managed to speak. "That's not possible." The cocky lieutenant was no longer smiling. "Chief, that was faster than your qualification time." It was faster than anyone's qualification time, another SEAL muttered, his voice carrying genuine awe. I've never seen anyone shoot a qual course that fast without missing. Alex shouldered her rifle, meeting Garrett's eyes directly. I believe you said something about an apology, Chief. Garrett's face had gone red. He took a step toward Alex, his hands clenched at his sides. The professional courtesy had evaporated, replaced by something that looked like barely controlled fury. Who the hell are you really? He demanded. And don't give me that hobbyist bullshit again. Nobody, and I mean nobody, shoots like that without professional military training. Advanced professional military training. I'm someone who knows how to shoot, Alex said calmly. That's all you need to know. That's not all I need to know, Garrett shot back. This is a secure military facility. You want to keep shooting here? You need to explain where you learned to shoot like a Tier 1 operator. Alex felt her control starting to slip. She had proven her point, demonstrated her capability, and now Garrett was pushing for exactly the answers she couldn't give. I don't owe you an explanation, Chief. I have proper authorization to use this facility. I demonstrated the skill you challenged me to demonstrate. Our deal was that if I passed, you'd leave me alone. So leave me alone. The other SEALs were watching the exchange like spectators at a tennis match. The muscular lieutenant stepped forward, his expression more curious than hostile. Ma'am, I think what the chief is trying to say, in his tactful way, is that we've all been doing this for a very long time. We know what elite shooting looks like. And what you just did wasn't just elite. That was something else entirely. Alex's hands tightened on her rifle. I appreciate the compliment, but I really just want to finish my range time. You're hiding something, Garrett said, and there was no anger in it now, just desperate need to understand. I don't know what, but I'm going to find out. And when I do, if you're lying about who you are or why you're really here, there will be consequences. Alex left the range that morning, knowing she had made a critical mistake. The smart operator never revealed more capability than absolutely necessary. She had just violated that principle spectacularly, and now she would pay the price in unwanted attention and inevitable investigation. She drove back to her apartment, her mind already running through contingency plans. But even as she considered her options, she knew she wouldn't run. Not this time. She was tired of running. 15 minutes later, her phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. Coffee shop, Point Loma, 20 minutes, Cross. Alex stared at the message. Commander Cross wasn't asking, he was telling. And somehow she knew this conversation would change everything. 20 minutes later, Alex sat in her car in the parking lot of a coffee shop in Point Loma, watching Commander Nathaniel Cross walk toward her. He was in civilian clothes, jeans and a polo shirt, but he moved with the unmistakable bearing of someone who'd spent decades in the military. He slid into the passenger seat without invitation, his expression unreadable. That was quite a show this morning, he said without preamble. 47 seconds, 10 for 10. I got the call from Garrett about 30 seconds after you left the range. I'm sorry if I caused problems, Alex said. You didn't cause problems, you caused questions. Cross turned to look at her directly. Questions I told Garrett he didn't get to ask. Questions I told him were above his pay grade and beyond his need to know. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet. Cross's expression hardened slightly. Because while I shut down Garrett's investigation, I couldn't stop my own curiosity. So I made more calls, pushed a little harder than I did the first time, and I got different non-answers. Alex's chest tightened. The kind of non-answers, Cross continued, that told me Garrett was closer to the truth than he realized. That you're not just someone with military background, you're someone with Tier 1 background. Someone who operated at levels that make SEAL Team 6 look like the minor leagues. He paused, studying her face. And the interesting thing is, when I mentioned the name Alexandra Brennan to a friend of mine who used to work CAG liaison, he went very quiet. Then he told me he couldn't talk about it. Then he suggested, very politely, that I stop asking and never mention that name in official channels again. Alex said nothing. There was nothing to say that wouldn't make things worse. Here's what I think happened, Cross said quietly. I think there was a program, classified program, probably run out of CAG or JSOC. I think they recruited and trained female operators for missions that male operators couldn't accomplish. Deep cover work, maybe. Operations in cultures where women had access men didn't. Precision work requiring someone who could move invisible through target environments. He leaned back in his seat. And I think when that program ended, for whatever political or budgetary reasons programs like that end, the women who served in it got cut loose. New identities, NDAs that will follow them to their graves, in orders to disappear into civilian life and never speak of what they did. Alex's throat was tight. That's a lot of speculation, Commander. Is it? Cross asked. Because from where I'm sitting, it explains everything. The shooting, the PTSD response to helicopters, the way you teach, the fact that inquiries about you get shut down by people with clearances I'll never have. He turned to face her fully. I'm not going to ask you to confirm any of this, Miss Brennan, because I know you can't. But I am going to tell you that if I'm right, if you serve this country in ways that will never be acknowledged, then you deserve better than what you're getting. You deserve respect. You deserve recognition. You deserve to be able to use the skills you earned without hiding like you committed a crime. Alex felt tears threatening and forced them back. What do you want from me, Commander? I want to offer you a job, Cross said simply. Civilian contractor. Training role. Teach my SEALs what you clearly know how to do. Make them better at the jobs that are going to get them killed if they're not good enough. Sir, I don't think that's wise given my background. Your background is precisely why it's necessary, Cross countered. Miss Brennan, we're losing good operators to mistakes that proper training could prevent. I watched you teach that Marine in 60 seconds what our instructors couldn't teach him in 3 weeks. That's not luck. That's expertise. And expertise like that needs to be shared. Alex shook her head. It's too risky. If people start digging, people won't dig, Cross said firmly, because I'll make it clear that they don't get to. You'll be a civilian contractor with specialized skills. Your past stays your past. What matters is what you can teach my people going forward. And if I say no, Cross smiled slightly, then you say no, and I respect that. But before you do, I want you to think about something. Those skills you have, that knowledge you earned, right now it's dying with you. Every day you hide it, that's knowledge that could save American lives, just disappearing into the void. Is that really what you want? Alex looked out the windshield, watching people move through the coffee shop parking lot. Normal people, living normal lives, unburdened by memories of missions that officially never happened and skills they weren't allowed to acknowledge. There's one more thing, Cross said. Garrett Thorne. The reason he's pushing so hard to figure out who you are. He's territorial, Alex said, protective of his range and his SEALs. That's part of it, Cross agreed. But there's more. Garrett lost his son 4 years ago. Staff Sergeant Caleb Thorne, Army Ranger, Syria, 2019. Classified operation. Garrett got the flag-draped coffin and a letter thanking him for his son's service, but no details about what happened or why. Alex's world tilted. She knew that name, knew that face, remembered a young ranger with Garrett's eyes and a quick smile and an aptitude for precision shooting that had made him one of her best students. Garrett's been trying to find out what really happened to Caleb ever since, Cross continued. Every inquiry gets shut down. Every question gets non-answered. And then you show up on his range, shooting like someone with classified training, having PTSD responses to helicopters, and he puts 2 and 2 together. He thinks I know what happened to his son, Alex said quietly. I think he knows you know, Cross corrected. He just doesn't know how to ask. Alex closed her eyes, seeing Caleb Thorne's face in her mind. 29 years old, eager, talented. Dead because he'd held a perimeter long enough for her team to extract a high-value target who possessed intelligence that would save hundreds of lives. "I can't talk about it," Alex said, her voice rough. "I know," Cross said gently, "but maybe you can talk to him. Not about the mission, not about the details, just operator to operator, father to someone who knew his son. Give him something he can hold on to that's more than official silence." Alex sat in silence for a long moment, processing everything Cross had said. The job offer, the revelation about Garrett, the weight of carrying knowledge that could give a grieving father some measure of peace, but that she was legally forbidden from sharing. "I need to think about it," she said finally. "Take all the time you need," Cross said, reaching for the door handle. "But Miss Brennan, consider this. You spent years serving in shadows. Maybe it's time to step into the light. Not all the way, not publicly, but enough to make a difference. Enough to honor the sacrifice of people like Caleb Thorne by ensuring his death led to something more than just silence." He climbed out of the car, then leaned back in through the open door. "My office number is in the base directory. When you're ready to talk, call me." Alex watched him walk to his own vehicle, a sensible sedan that matched his civilian clothes. She sat in her car for another 20 minutes, thinking about Caleb Thorne and 7 other operators who had died protecting a mission she couldn't discuss. Thinking about Garrett Thorne, still searching for meaning in his son's death 4 years later. Thinking about the skills she carried, the knowledge she possessed, and whether Commander Cross was right that hiding it was just letting it die. Finally, she pulled out her phone and stared at it for a long time before making a decision that would change everything. She didn't call Commander Cross. Not yet. There was something else she needed to do first. 2 days later, Alex returned to Coronado at her usual time. She set up at lane 7, went through her normal routine, and waited. Garrett Thorne appeared within 30 minutes, approaching with the same measured stride but different energy. Less aggressive, more uncertain. "Miss Brennan," he said, stopping at a respectful distance. "Can we talk?" Alex set down her rifle. "Off the record?" "Completely." They walked to a bench near the edge of the range, far enough from other shooters that their conversation wouldn't be overheard. Garrett sat heavily, suddenly looking all of his 62 years. "Commander Cross told me he talked to you," Garrett said. "Told me to back off, that your background was classified and I didn't have clearance to know. But he also told me about my son, about the timing, about the possibility that you might have known Caleb." Alex chose her words carefully. "Chief Thorne, I can't discuss classified operations. I legally can't. But I can tell you that soldiers like your son, the ones selected for special programs that don't officially exist, they understand the risks. They volunteer knowing they might die in operations their families will never hear about. And they do it anyway because the work matters." "That's not enough," Garrett said. And for the first time, Alex heard the pain underneath his frustration. "I need to know he didn't die for nothing. I need to know it meant something." Alex looked at him, seeing the grief that 4 years hadn't diminished. Seeing a father who would carry this wound for the rest of his life. She made a decision. "It meant something," she said quietly. "Your son was exactly the kind of operator that program needed. The kind who could learn faster than anyone expected. The kind who could adapt and overcome. The kind who made a difference." Garrett stared at her, understanding dawning across his face. "You trained him." Alex said nothing, but her silence was answer enough. "I've been harassing you," Garrett said slowly. "Challenging you, questioning your presence here. And all this time, you were one of the people who made my son into the warrior he became, who gave him the skills that probably kept him alive longer than he would have lasted otherwise." "Chief Thorne," Alex started, but Garrett held up his hand. "No, let me finish." He took a breath. "I owe you an apology, multiple apologies, for treating you like a threat when you were the exact opposite, for using my position to try to intimidate you, for not trusting that maybe there were things about this war I didn't and would never understand. You were protecting your team, Alex said. That's what good chiefs do. Maybe, Garrett said, but I was also being an ass, and I'm sorry. Alex nodded slowly, accepting the apology. For what it's worth, your son was a good student, one of the best. Can you tell me anything else? Garrett asked. Anything at all about what happened? Alex met his eyes directly. Your son and 7 other operators held a perimeter for 28 minutes so my team could extract a high-value target. That target had intelligence about coordinated attacks on 3 U.S. embassies. Over 400 Americans would have died without what he knew. Caleb Thorne saved hundreds of lives, Chief. He was a hero, the kind nobody will ever hear about, but a hero nonetheless. Garrett's eyes filled with tears. He looked away, struggling for composure. When he spoke again, his voice was rough with emotion. Thank you for telling me that, for giving me something real to hold on to. They sat in silence for a moment, the morning sun burning through the last of the coastal fog around them. The range continued its rhythm of shooting and commands, oblivious to the quiet understanding being reached between the chief and the woman he had spent weeks trying to expose. Commander Cross offered me a job, Alex said finally. Training position. He thinks I should teach what I know. He's right, Garrett said immediately. Those skills you have, that knowledge, it shouldn't die with you. It should be passed forward. That's how we honor the people who died for it. I'm afraid, Alex admitted, of the attention, of the questions, of what happens if someone digs too deep. Then we make sure they don't, Garrett said firmly. Commander Cross has already made it clear your background is off limits. I'll back that up. The other chiefs will back it up. You teach our people to be better. We make sure you can do it without looking over your shoulder. Alex studied him, seeing the sincerity in his expression. Why would you do that? You don't owe me anything. Yes, I do, Garrett said quietly. You gave my son skills that mattered, skills that served a purpose. The least I can do is give you a place where you can keep doing that, where you don't have to hide anymore. He stood, extending his hand. Start over? Not as adversaries, but as 2 operators who both lost people to missions that officially never happened. Alex took his hand, feeling the strength in his grip. I'd like that, Chief Thorne. Call me Garrett, he said. If we're going to be working together, might as well use first names. Alex, she replied. Garrett nodded, then turned to look at the range. You know what Caleb used to say? He said the best operators were the ones who could teach what they knew, who could take their expertise and multiply it across the next generation. He would have loved watching you teach. I wish I could have told him that, Alex said softly. You just did, Garrett replied, and somehow I think he knows. 3 days later, Alex sat in Commander Cross's office with Garrett beside her, no longer as her interrogator, but as her advocate. Miss Brennan, Cross said, leaning back in his chair, have you made a decision about my offer? Alex looked at Garrett, who gave her an encouraging nod. Then she turned back to Cross. I have conditions, she said. Name them. Full autonomy over curriculum and methods. No interference from traditional instructors who think they know better. Agreed. Ability to reject students who aren't ready. I won't waste time on people who aren't committed to learning. Also agreed. And one more thing, Alex met Cross's eyes directly. I want credit for my students' successes to go to them, not to me. No publicity, no articles about the mysterious civilian instructor. They earn their achievements. I'm just a guide. Cross smiled. That might be the most operator thing I've ever heard. You have a deal, Miss Brennan. They shook hands, and Alex felt something settle into place. For the first time since the program ended, she had a role that fit. Not her old life, but something new, built on the foundation of what she'd learned and survived. There's one more thing, Cross said. We'd like you to do a demonstration, formal one, for the senior leadership of Naval Special Warfare. Show them what you've been teaching and why it matters. Alex's stomach tightened. How formal are we talking? 20 to 30 officers, controlled environment. You demonstrate advanced techniques and explain the methodology behind them. Cross paused. I know you prefer to stay out of the spotlight, but this would help justify the resources we're allocating to your program. When? Alex asked. 2 weeks. We'll hold it here at Coronado. Limited attendance, no media. Alex looked at Garrett again. He gave her another nod, and she saw something else in his expression. He was proud of her. Proud that she was being recognized for her capabilities, even in this limited way. Okay, Alex said. I'll do it. Excellent, Cross said. We'll handle all the logistics. You just focus on showing them what makes your methods special. After Cross dismissed them, Garrett walked with Alex back toward the parking lot. You sure about this? He asked. Demonstrating for flag officers is going to bring attention. I'm sure, Alex said. You were right. This knowledge shouldn't die with me. If I'm going to teach it, I need to prove it works. To the people who control the resources and make the decisions. They reached her car, and Garrett extended his hand again. Welcome to the team, Alex. Officially this time. Alex shook his hand, feeling the weight of what she just committed to. She was no longer hiding, no longer pretending to be less than she was. She was stepping back into the light, into purpose, into the role she'd been trained for all those years ago. It was terrifying, but it was also right. That evening, Alex called Commander Cross. Sir, about that demonstration, she said. I'm ready. 2 weeks should be enough time to prepare. Cross's smile was audible through the phone. Outstanding, Miss Brennan. I'll have Garrett coordinate the logistics with you. This is going to change everything. After hanging up, Alex stood at her apartment window, watching the sunset over the city. In 2 weeks, she would stand before senior naval leadership and prove that the Ghost could teach, that the knowledge earned in shadows could serve in light. And for the first time since the program ended, that felt like enough. The 2 weeks before the demonstration passed in a blur of preparation that felt both familiar and foreign. Familiar because Alex had spent years training for high-stakes operations where failure meant death. Foreign because this time the stakes weren't measured in lives lost, but in opportunity gained or squandered. She designed a demonstration that would showcase the core principles she'd been teaching without revealing the full extent of her capabilities. A careful balance between impressive and overwhelming, between proving competence and inviting the wrong kind of scrutiny. Garrett helped her refine the presentation, offering insights into what would resonate with senior leadership and what might raise uncomfortable questions. They practiced in the evenings after the range closed, Alex running through her demonstration while Garrett played the role of skeptical observer. You're holding back, he said after one practice run, his voice carrying across the empty range. I can see it. You're doing maybe 70% of what you're capable of. That's the point, Alex replied, checking her rifle. I want to show them enough to justify the program without showing them so much they start questioning how I learned it. Garrett walked closer, his weathered face serious in the fading light. Screw that. Show them everything. These are warriors, Alex. They respect capability. They won't care how you learned it if you can prove it works. Alex shook her head. You don't understand. There are people who would see my capabilities as a threat, who would see a woman with my skills as something that needs to be controlled or contained. I can't give them that ammunition. Then show them you're not a threat, Garrett argued. Show them you're an asset. The best way to do that is to demonstrate exactly how good you are, and then make it clear you're using those skills to make their people better. Alex considered this, knowing it went against every instinct she developed over 3 years of hiding. But maybe Garrett was right. Maybe the only way forward was to stop apologizing for what she could do and start owning it completely. Okay, she said finally, no more holding back. Garrett grinned, the expression transforming his usually stern face. Now you're talking like the operator I know you are. The demonstration was scheduled for Friday morning, 0800 hours. As Alex drove to Coronado that day, her hands were steady on the wheel, but her mind was racing. This was the point of no return. After today, she would never be anonymous again. She would be known, recognized, visible. The observation deck overlooking the range was crowded when she arrived. Captains and commanders, a few lieutenant commanders, and in the front row, Rear Admiral Robert Kincaid. Silver-haired, ramrod straight, with the kind of bearing that came from decades of command. His chest carried ribbons from the Cold War, the Gulf War, and conflicts Alex recognized but couldn't discuss. All of them wore expressions of polite skepticism. They had seen countless demonstrations over their careers. One more civilian contractor promising revolutionary techniques was just another Friday morning. Alex stood at the firing line with her rifle, feeling the weight of 30 sets of eyes. Garrett and Senior Chief Landry flanked her, along with Lance Corporal Dylan Briggs and 3 other students she'd been training. They were there as both support and living proof of her methods. Commander Cross made the introductions, keeping Alex's background deliberately vague. Miss Brennan is a civilian contractor with extensive experience in precision marksmanship. Over the past weeks, she's been working with select members of SEAL Team 7 with remarkable results. Today, she'll demonstrate some of the techniques she's been teaching. Alex stepped forward, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Thank you, Commander. What I'm going to show you today isn't about flashy shooting or breaking records. It's about a fundamental shift in how we approach long-range precision work, a shift from controlling the weapon to becoming one with it. She could see the skepticism deepen. Philosophical approaches to shooting weren't what these men respected. They respected results. I'm going to demonstrate 5 shots at varying distances and conditions, Alex continued. After each shot, one of my students will attempt the same shot using traditional methods, then attempt it again using the techniques I've taught them. The difference will speak for itself. Fair enough, Rear Admiral Kincaid said from the front row. Show us what you've got, Miss Brennan. Alex settled into position at lane 7. The first target sat at 600 meters. Standard distance, no wind complications. She fired without hesitation. Center mass. Briggs stepped up, fired using his old technique. The shot hit low and left. Respectable grouping, but not centered. Then he reset, applied Alex's breathing method, and fired again. Dead center. The officers stirred with mild interest. Improvement was good, but not revolutionary. Second target, Alex said, 800 meters, 15-mile-per-hour crosswind from the east. She fired. Perfect compensation. Center mass hit. Then she nodded to Petty Officer Eli Whitaker, who attempted the shot. His first attempt missed entirely, blown off target by the wind. His second attempt, using Alex's wind-reading technique, hit the outer ring. Getting warmer, one of the captains muttered. Third target, Alex announced, 1,000 meters, variable wind, elevated position requiring angle compensation. This was where traditional methods started to break down. The environmental factors became too complex for simple calculations. Alex took 30 seconds to read the environment, feeling the wind patterns, the temperature gradients, the subtle air movements that meters couldn't measure. Then she fired. The shot took nearly 2 full seconds to reach the target. It hit exactly where she'd aimed, accounting for every variable. Senior Chief Landry attempted next. His traditional method put him 3 feet low. His attempt with Alex's technique hit the outer edge of the target. Close, but not perfect. The officers were leaning forward now. This was getting interesting. Fourth target, Alex said, and her voice carried a new edge. 1,200 meters, multiple wind shifts, target partially obscured by atmospheric distortion. This was beyond standard SEAL qualification distances. This was specialist territory, the kind of shot that required years of experience in perfect conditions. Alex studied the target for a full minute, her breathing so controlled it was barely visible. The world narrowed to wind and distance and the shimmer of heat rising from the valley floor. Then she fired. The round flew true, cutting through shifting air currents and heat distortion to strike center mass. The observation area went silent. One of the commanders stood up to get a better view of the target monitor, as if proximity would help him understand what he just witnessed. No one else attempted that shot. It was understood that what Alex had just done was beyond traditional training methods entirely. Fifth target, Alex said quietly, and now every eye was locked on her. 1,500 meters, extreme distance, conditions deliberately made difficult. She could feel the tension in the room now. 1,500 meters was sniper specialist territory. Very few operators could consistently hit targets at that range, and those who could spent years developing the skill. Behind her, she heard someone whisper, "This is impossible. She's setting herself up to fail." Alex closed her eyes for a moment, centering herself. She thought about the missions where she'd made shots like this, under conditions far worse than a sunny California morning. She thought about Caleb Thorne and the 7 others who had died, trusting that she could do the impossible when it mattered. She opened her eyes, settled into position, and became absolutely still. The rifle was no longer a separate object, but an extension of her body. The target was no longer distant, but connected to her by an invisible line that only she could see. She fired. The shot seemed to hang in the air forever. Alex didn't need the monitor to know where it would land. She felt it the same way she'd felt hundreds of shots in places that didn't exist on maps. Dead center. Rear Admiral Kincaid stood slowly, walked to the monitor, stared at it for a long moment, then turned to look at Alex with an expression of pure astonishment. "Miss Brennan," he said, his voice carrying the weight of 32 years of military service. "In all that time, I've never seen shooting like that." "Thank you, sir," Alex said. "That's not a compliment," the Admiral said. "That's a statement of fact bordering on disbelief." He looked at Commander Cross. "Where did you find her?" "That's classified, sir," Cross replied smoothly. "What matters is that she's here now and willing to share her knowledge." Before the Admiral could respond, a voice cut across the observation deck. Master Chief Sullivan Donovan, 58 years old and every inch a traditional SEAL, stood from his position in the second row. "Miss Brennan, with respect," Donovan said, his voice carrying the rough edges of decades spent shouting commands over gunfire and helicopter rotors. 1,500 meters in these conditions isn't skill, it's luck. I've been shooting for 35 years. I've made that shot twice in my life, and both times I knew I got lucky. Alex turned to face him, keeping her expression neutral. "Master Chief, would you like to try first? Show us what realistic expectations are." Donovan's jaw tightened. He clearly hadn't expected the offer. Around him, other officers shifted in their seats, suddenly very interested in what would happen next. "I'll demonstrate what a real-world result looks like," Donovan said, standing and making his way down to the firing line. "So these officers understand the difference between possibility and probability." Alex stepped aside, giving him lane 7. Donovan settled into position with the practiced ease of someone who'd done this thousands of times. His fundamentals were textbook perfect: breathing controlled, stance solid, grip appropriate. He studied the target for nearly 2 minutes, running calculations that Alex could see playing out in the minute adjustments of his position. Then he fired. The shot landed in the outer ring, an excellent hit given the conditions and distance. Proof of decades of experience and countless hours of practice. Donovan stood, turning to face the observation deck. "That, gentlemen, is a real-world result at 1,500 meters in variable conditions. Anything better than that is statistical outlier territory." "Your fundamentals are outstanding, Master Chief," Alex said quietly. "Decades of experience showing in every movement." Donovan turned to her, clearly expecting argument or defensiveness. Instead, he found only genuine respect. "But you're calculating instead of feeling," Alex continued. "You're trying to control variables instead of flowing with them." "What's the difference?" Donovan asked, his tone defensive but his eyes curious. "May I show you?" Alex asked. Donovan hesitated, clearly torn between professional pride and genuine curiosity about what this small civilian woman could possibly teach him that 35 years hadn't already. How? He asked finally. Alex gestured to her rifle, the custom Macmillan TAC-50 that represented 3 years of savings and the last tangible connection to who she'd been. Here, use mine. I'll talk you through it. The observation deck went completely silent. Even Admiral Kincaid leaned forward, clearly not expecting this turn of events. Donovan stared at the rifle, then at Alex. Ma'am, that's your weapon, your setup. You should shoot it. Alex met his eyes directly. Master Chief, if I can't teach this, it doesn't matter what I can shoot. The whole point is that this knowledge is transferable, that it's not magic or natural talent, but methodology that can be learned. She held out the rifle. Take it. Let me show you what 35 years of experience can do when you stop fighting yourself. Donovan took the rifle slowly, handling it with the reverence due any precision instrument. He settled into position, and Alex moved to stand beside him. Not behind, where a traditional instructor would stand. Beside, as equals. Feel the wind on your face, Alex said, her voice quiet but carrying in the silent observation deck. Don't measure it, don't calculate it, just feel it. Donovan's breathing changed slightly, his hyper-focus on calculations giving way to sensory awareness. The rifle knows where it wants to settle, Alex continued. You have 35 years of muscle memory, 35 years of your body learning what works. Stop overriding it with your brain. Trust what your body already knows. She could see Donovan's stance shifting, minute adjustments as decades of ingrained knowledge surfaced when conscious control stepped back. Your body has done this 10,000 times, Alex said. It knows the wind, it knows the distance, it knows the rifle. You just need to get out of its way and let it work. Donovan's breathing deepened, his entire posture relaxing in a way that paradoxically made him look more focused, not less. When it feels right, Alex said softly, it is right. Stop questioning. Trust. Send it. Donovan's finger pressed the trigger with the same gentle pressure Alex had taught Briggs weeks earlier. The rifle fired. 3.4 seconds of flight time while 30 officers held their breath. The round impacted dead center. Donovan stayed frozen in position for a long moment, as if moving might somehow change what had just happened. Then he slowly stood, staring at the target monitor with an expression that cycled through disbelief, wonder, and something that looked almost like grief. I've never, he started, his voice rough. How did you? Alex smiled gently. You did that, Master Chief. I just helped you get out of your own way. 35 years of experience. You already knew how. You just needed permission to trust it instead of overthinking it. The observation deck erupted. Admiral Kincaid stood first, beginning a slow clap that the other officers quickly joined. The sound built until it filled the space, washing over Alex and Donovan in waves. Donovan looked at Alex with an expression she'd never seen on his face before. Pure respect, untainted by skepticism or defensiveness. Ma'am, he said quietly, barely audible under the applause. I was wrong. About everything. About you, about what you could teach, about what I thought I knew. He paused. I'd be honored to be your first official student. Master Chief, Alex replied, feeling emotion tighten her throat. I'd be honored to teach you. Admiral Kincaid descended from the observation deck, the other officers parting to let him through. He walked directly to Alex, extending his hand. Miss Brennan, welcome to Naval Special Warfare, officially this time. Whatever resources you need, whatever access you require, Commander Cross will ensure you have it. He turned to address the assembled officers. Gentlemen, what we just witnessed wasn't luck or natural talent. It was methodology. Transferable, teachable methodology that can make our people better at the jobs that will get them killed if they're not good enough. Miss Brennan's program is now a priority for this command. As the officers filed out, discussing what they'd seen, Garrett approached Alex with undisguised pride on his face. You did it, he said simply. No holding back, just pure capability and the willingness to share it. Couldn't have done it without you, Alex replied. You pushed me to stop hiding. You were never really hiding, Garrett said. You were just waiting for the right moment to step into the light. 3 months later, Alex's program had expanded beyond anything she'd imagined. She taught 3 mornings a week at Coronado, working with SEALs who ranged from fresh operators to master chiefs with decades of experience. Once a week, she drove to Camp Pendleton to work with Marine Scout snipers. Twice a month, Army Rangers flew in from various bases for intensive weekend sessions. The work was exhausting and fulfilling in equal measure. For the first time since the program ended, Alex felt like she was using her skills for their intended purpose. Not killing from shadows, but teaching the next generation to survive the missions that would inevitably come. Garrett had become not just an advocate, but a genuine friend. The 28-year age gap between them seemed irrelevant when they were on the range. 2 operators who understood each other's language and shared each other's wounds. One Tuesday morning, as Alex was setting up for her regular session, Garrett approached with a woman in Navy uniform. Lieutenant Commander Rebecca Marshall, based on her collar insignia. Blonde, athletic, with the kind of controlled intensity that marks someone who operated under pressure. Alex, Garrett said, I'd like you to meet Lieutenant Commander Beck Marshall. She's with a program I can't name, doing work I can't describe. Alex understood immediately. Second-generation program, still active, still operating in the shadows where Alex used to live. Miss Brennan, Beck said, shaking Alex's hand with a grip that spoke of physical conditioning and controlled strength. I've been following your work. What you've accomplished here is remarkable. Thank you, Commander, Alex said carefully. Beck glanced at Garrett, who nodded and stepped away to give them privacy. When she spoke again, her voice was lower, meant only for Alex. I was part of the second iteration. The program that came after yours ended. Different structure, different mission set, but same basic concept. Female operators for roles that male operators can't fill. Alex felt her chest tighten. They'd continued it. After shutting down her program, they'd simply created a new one with fewer resources and less oversight. We don't have your level of training or resources, Beck continued, but what we do have is a desperate need for the kind of expertise you possess. I was hoping you might consider sharing some of your knowledge with our people. 6 operators, 2-week intensive course. Alex thought about the women who'd served in her program, the ones who'd thrived and the ones who'd broken. She thought about what proper training could mean for this new generation, how many lives it might save or extend. What kind of timeline? Alex asked. As soon as possible, Beck said. We have deployments coming up. Situations where my people will be operating in conditions they're not fully prepared for. She paused, and Alex heard the fear underneath the professional composure. I don't want to lose anyone because they didn't have the training they needed. Alex looked at this woman, seeing herself 5 years ago. Dedicated, capable, operating in shadows without adequate support, putting female operators in danger without giving them all the tools they needed to survive. 2 weeks, Alex said. Intensive. I'll teach them everything I can, but after that, you keep me informed. If they need additional training, if they run into problems I can help solve, you contact me. I won't train them and then abandon them the way we were abandoned. Beck's professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing genuine emotion. Deal. And thank you, Miss Brennan. You have no idea what this means. The 2-week intensive course was unlike anything Alex had taught before. The 6 women who arrived were already capable operators, but their training had gaps that made Alex's stomach turn with recognition and anger. They knew basics of precision shooting, but lacked the advanced environmental reading that made the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Alex worked them 12 hours a day, compressing months of instruction into 2 weeks of relentless practice. She taught them to read wind like a language, to become invisible in urban and rural environments, to make impossible shots under impossible pressure. She shared everything she knew, holding nothing back. On the final day, after the last qualification exercise, one of the students approached Alex privately. Petty Officer Hannah Caldwell, 27 years old, Montana rancher's daughter, with the kind of quiet competence that reminded Alex of herself at that age. "Ma'am," Hannah said, tears in her eyes, "I don't know how to thank you. Before this course, I was terrified every time they sent me out. I knew I wasn't prepared for what they were asking me to do. Now," she paused, swallowing hard, "now I feel like I might actually survive this." Alex pulled the young woman into a brief embrace, feeling Hannah's shoulders shake with relief and release. "You're going to do more than survive," Alex said firmly. "You're going to excel. And when you run into problems, you contact me. I meant what I said. You're not alone in this." 1 week after the course ended, Alex received an urgent call. Beck Marshall's voice was tight with stress. "Alex, we have a situation. Yemen operation, team pinned down. Hannah has a shot at an enemy technical, 1,100 meters. If she makes it, 4 Marines get out alive. If she doesn't—" Beck didn't finish the sentence. "Patch me through," Alex said, already moving toward her car. 20 minutes later, Alex sat in the secure communications room at Coronado with Garrett and Commander Cross, connected via satellite to a rooftop in Yemen, where Hannah Caldwell was trying to control her breathing and read conditions that would challenge operators twice her age. "Hannah, it's Brennan. I'm here." "Ma'am?" Hannah's voice cracked with relief and stress. "Oh, thank God, I can't read these conditions. Urban heat, wind shifting. I don't know the exact range." "Hannah, stop," Alex said calmly. "Remember week 1. What did I teach you about urban heat? Rises in columns, creates vertical wind shear." "Good, what do you feel right now?" Hannah described what she was experiencing, and Alex could picture the environment perfectly. She'd been in similar situations, felt the same wind patterns, dealt with the same uncertainty. "Your training is talking to you," Alex said. "Everything I taught you is still there. Trust it. Trust yourself." The tension built. Garrett watched Alex with understanding, seeing her slip back into the role she'd been born for, teaching warriors to survive impossible situations. "When you're ready, you'll know," Alex said. "Don't force it, just trust yourself." "Sending it," Hannah whispered. 2.8 seconds of flight time, an eternity compressed into less than 3 heartbeats. "Hit! Technical neutralized! Marines are moving!" Hannah's voice broke completely. "Oh my God, I did it! Ma'am, I actually did it!" Alex found tears streaming down her own face. 4 years of hidden pain and purpose releasing in this moment. "You saved them, Hannah. You were always capable of that. Now everyone knows it. Now you know it." Garrett's hand landed on her shoulder, steady and supportive. Commander Cross was smiling, understanding that this moment validated everything they'd built. 1 week later, Alex received an official summons to Washington, D.C., the Pentagon, a meeting with the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Special Operations and Low-Intensity Conflict. The briefing room was intimidating, filled with flag officers from all services and the SOCOM commander himself. But Alex had faced worse rooms than this, had briefed people with higher clearances about operations with bigger consequences. "Miss Brennan," the assistant secretary said, "your results speak for themselves. Over 200 students trained in the past 6 months. Capability improvements that typically take years, achieved in weeks or months. We want to institutionalize this, create an official pipeline for training advanced combat marksmanship across all services, with you as lead architect." Alex had prepared for this, had known. Alex took a breath. "And one more thing. I want the operators who died protecting classified missions recognized. Caleb Thorne and 7 others. Syria, January 2019. Classified citation. Their families deserve to know their sacrifice mattered." The room went silent. Senior officers exchanged glances, calculating political cost versus moral imperative. Finally, the SOCOM commander spoke. "We can make that happen, Miss Brennan. It won't be public, but the families will know." "That's all I ask," Alex said. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived at Alex's apartment, forwarded through official channels, marked with Coronado Naval Base return address, but bearing a civilian postmark from Ohio. Alex opened it with trembling hands. The handwriting was feminine, slightly shaky, the writing of someone who'd composed this letter many times before finding the courage to send it. "Miss Brennan, Garrett told me about you, about the program, about Caleb's training. For 4 years, I've been drowning in questions with no answers. Knowing he died protecting something meaningful helps more than you can imagine. Knowing someone as skilled and dedicated as you trained him helps even more. Thank you for making his last months matter. Thank you for carrying that knowledge forward. Thank you for not letting him be forgotten. Catherine Thorne." Alex sat on her apartment floor and cried for the first time since the program had ended. Not tears of grief or loss, but of release, of knowing that the silence she'd been forced to keep hadn't erased Caleb's sacrifice, that his mother had some measure of peace, however small. Garrett found her an hour later at Lane 7, where she'd driven without conscious decision. He sat beside her on the bench, not speaking, just present. "Catherine's letter," Alex finally said, showing him the paper. "She thanked me for training him, for remembering him." "You gave her what the government never could," Garrett said quietly. "Closure, meaning, the knowledge that her son's death served a purpose beyond official silence." "He gave me everything," Alex said. "Him and the others. They protected my missions, and I can't even talk about it." "You don't have to talk about it," Garrett said. "You're living it. Every student you train carries their legacy forward. That's not silence. That's the opposite of silence." 1 year after her demonstration, on a June morning identical to the one when she'd first faced Garrett's challenge, Alex arrived at Coronado for the inaugural class of the official Advanced Combat Marksmanship program. 22 students waited at the range, 12 women, 10 men, SEALs, Marines, Rangers, even 2 Air Force pararescue jumpers, all services, all hungry to learn. Master Chief Donovan was there, now officially designated as co-instructor. In the years since Alex had handed him her rifle, he'd become one of her strongest advocates, his conversion from skeptic to believer complete and genuine. Garrett stood at the observation deck with Commander Cross, watching Alex work with the new students. A young female Marine, Lance Corporal Emma Sutherland from Tennessee, was struggling with the same fundamentals that had challenged Briggs a year earlier. Alex worked with her patiently, using the same words, the same philosophy, the same gentle guidance that had transformed dozens of students before her. "The rifle wants to settle here. Let it. Become still enough that you and the weapon are the same thing." Emma's shot landed dead center. Her face transformed with understanding and joy. The other students applauded. Alex caught Garrett's eye across the range and smiled. A real smile, unguarded and genuine. That evening, as the sun set over the Pacific, Alex stood alone at Lane 7 for a final session. The range was empty, the other students and instructors long gone. She loaded her rifle, the familiar Macmillan TAC-50 that had been her constant companion through transformation and revelation. The target sat at 1,500 meters, the shot she'd used to prove herself a year ago. Alex settled into position, feeling her body fall into the familiar geometry. But this time, the shooting wasn't about proving anything. It was about remembering, about honoring. She thought about Caleb Thorne and the 7 others who died in Syria, about the women from her program who hadn't survived the transition to civilian life, about Catherine Thorne's letter and the gift of knowing that silence didn't mean erasure. She fired. The round flew true, 3.4 seconds of perfect physics and practiced art. Center mass. Garrett found her there, as she'd known he would. He'd made a habit of checking on her after late sessions, ensuring she didn't get too lost in memories. "Still got it," he said, settling beside her. "Never lost it," Alex replied. "Just forgot why it mattered." "And now?" Alex looked at the range where 22 students had spent the day learning what she'd spent a lifetime perfecting. "Now I remember. It matters because they matter. It matters because Caleb and the others didn't die for nothing. It matters because every student I train might save lives I'll never know about." "That's legacy," Garrett said. "Not medals or recognition. Impact. The kind that ripples forward through time in lives you'll never meet." They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell over Coronado. Two warriors separated by nearly 3 decades of age, but united by understanding, by shared loss and shared purpose, by knowledge that service didn't require recognition to matter. "Thank you," Alex said finally, "for pushing me, for believing when you had every reason not to, for helping me remember who I was." "You never forgot who you were," Garrett replied. "You just needed permission to be her again." Alex thought about that as she drove home. Permission. Such a simple word for such a profound gift. For 3 years, she'd hidden because she thought that was what safety required, what survival demanded. But Garrett had shown her something different, that the skills she carried, the knowledge she possessed, the person she'd been trained to be, all of it could exist in the light, could serve without shadows, could make a difference without requiring silence. In her apartment that night, Alex pulled out the box where she kept mementos from her new life. Student notes thanking her for training, Catherine Thorne's letter, a photo from the graduation of her first official class, 22 warriors standing with pride and purpose. She added one more item, a simple brass casing from her 1,500-meter shot that evening. Not a trophy, but a reminder of how far she'd come, of what she'd built from the ashes of a program that had tried to erase her. Alexandra Brennan had been a ghost, someone who didn't officially exist, whose service would never be acknowledged, whose capabilities had to remain hidden for safety and secrecy. But ghosts, she'd learned, could become something else, could transform from invisible shadows into visible mentors, could turn silence into teaching, could make the ultimate service not the missions completed in darkness, but the knowledge shared in light. She wasn't a ghost anymore. She was a teacher, a mentor, an architect of the next generation's capability. Every student she trained carried forward the legacy of warriors who died protecting missions that officially never happened. That wasn't erasure, that was immortality. Alex turned off the lights and stood at her window, looking out over San Diego toward Coronado, where tomorrow she would return to Lane 7 and teach warriors to be better than they thought possible. She smiled in the darkness, thinking about Caleb Thorne and the others, thinking about Catherine's letter and Garrett's friendship, and 22 students hungry to learn. They had tried to make her disappear, turn her into a ghost that haunted classified files and buried memories. But you couldn't erase knowledge, couldn't erase sacrifice, couldn't erase the impact of skills shared and lives saved and legacies built. Alexandra Brennan had been a ghost. Now she was eternal. And that, she thought, as sleep finally claimed her, was exactly how it should be.